y'all, welcome and welcome back. Today I have more of your own terrifying stories to read to you today, so let's get into it. As always, if you have any stories you'd like for me to read, please send them in the email in the description and put YouTube either in like the description tab or somewhere at the beginning so that I know. And yeah, let's get into the stories. The first story is something I was told from when I was around 3. I tried to climb to my TV and the dresser tilted towards me and the TV fell. My dad came in thinking that I got hurt, but the TV was across the room smoking. We called that my guardian angel. The next stories all happened when me and my dad went hunting together. The first time he took me with him, we were driving through a forest around 4:30 in the morning with huge trees. We then got to a spot where we were walking around before we heard a child laughing from a ditch we came from. Driving back home, the large trees were bushes and not trees. The second time, we saw a sheep that had a human-like stare, and when we looked at it, it watched us drive past. The next thing you saw was a UFO. We drove on a large straight road where we saw a flashing light. I memorized where it was, and when we got back to it, it was gone. This was right after my dad had told me some stories he had. If you want those, I can send those too. The last one was something I heard. I was in a light sleep one night, and I heard something whisper my name in my ear, and I jolted awake to see no one awake in my house. I woke close to 3:45. They also added a little extra in another email. They said, I don't know if this helps with the UFO, but we did pass the Great Salt Lake between Salt Lake City and Wendover and the salt plant when we saw it. Once you told me the location, yeah, that makes sense that you saw a UFO. I think that's pretty common through there, actually. Alright, this next story is titled, There's Something Weird About Williamsburg. To begin with, my parents divorced when I was very young. They had split custody, so I would live with my dad during the week and my mom during the weekend and school breaks. My mom remarried in 2013, and when I was with my mom and stepfather, we spent a lot of time moving in and out of houses across my hometown. We couldn't afford to buy a house yet. In late 2018, we were evicted from a rental home and were living with my grandparents. And in late spring, early summer, my parents bought a house in Williamsburg, Indiana, about 15 minutes away from my hometown. Williamsburg was a very small, very old village, built sometime in the mid or late 1800s. It had one fire station, a post office, and a school that wasn't used for much as far as I remember. It was relatively close to an Amish community, and they would pass through all the time. Some people would wave at them, and they would wave back. The home my mom bought was probably one of the largest houses in the town, as many were pretty small. This town didn't feel bad, and it had kind of a relaxing and calm energy, unlike any small township I've been to. My family and I loved it there, and we loved our house and the location. The house that we lived in was built in the late 1800s, around 1870 to 1890. It was roughly 130 to 140 years old, and it was in good condition, all but the garage that had collapsed before we moved in. Everyone in the family loved the house except for my older sister. My sister describes that when we first moved in, while she was looking around the home and our parents were painting the walls, she went into my bedroom. My bedroom was relatively large with a small attic door on the left wall. My sister told me that when she opened the door, she felt an off energy. When she looked, she saw a tall, dark male figure. She told me he didn't look old or very young either, and he wore a suit. His energy was off at best. She said it didn't feel necessarily evil, but she felt like it didn't want us there. I didn't see this when we were moving in, but there were more than just that entity. I remember seeing multiple spirits in that house. I specifically remember a young girl, a young boy, an older woman, an older man, a cat, and a dog. These spirits were benevolent, and when they did things, it was simply just to show and tell us that they were there. Well, I remember one night in that house when my younger sister had come over to stay the night. She slept on the side of the bed facing the door, and I slept on the side closest to the wall, as I always did. There was an outlet on the floor, and I plugged my phone up and left it there to charge for the night. I turned on my DVD player and our movie for the night, which was Finding Dory, and we fell asleep relatively quickly. I woke up the next morning and unplugged and checked my phone like I usually did, but when I opened it, it was in the camera. I wasn't on my camera before I went to sleep, and just when I started getting a weird feeling, I saw the camera roll, and there was a blurry blue photo. When I went into the camera roll, it revealed 12 or more photos where it looked like someone had picked up my phone and kept pressing the shutter button while moving closer and closer to my TV. At first, I thought it was my sister because she had a habit of wanting to use my phone, but she told me it wasn't her. She told me she didn't even wake up at all during the night, not to mention my phone was plugged up in the same spot it was when I went to sleep. I don't believe it was just my house that was haunted, though. The town was built over limestone and a river, so I believe that had something to do with the energy of this town, but it wasn't just my house. I had a few friends in the town that I had made when I moved there. They were around my age, and we spent a lot of time playing from near sunrise to sunset all summer. They had neighbors who lived on the very edge of the town next to a cornfield. Once I was telling them about the spirits in my home, and then they admitted that their house too was haunted. They told me that once in the night, the husband had gotten up in the middle of the night to go get water. He told me that he was heading back upstairs to his bedroom and heard a blood-curdling scream, and when he looked up the stairs, he saw a young girl around the age of 3 at the landing. Her hair was a mess and she was wearing a nightgown covered with blood. He said it looked like her throat had been slit wide open. He looked into the history of that house, and after speaking to multiple previous owners, he had discovered the history. At some point, a man living in that home had unalived his wife and children. I couldn't find any news on that of the house, but the house and town itself is also very old. He'd taken me and my friend into the home where he showed the blood stains that he and his wife had covered up with a rug. Around a year or less after I met them, they moved out and so did their neighbors. The last story happened in my home very shortly before we had moved out. This happened all in one day. The first part late at night around 2 in the morning, and the second part at around 9 in the morning. It was my last day living in that house, and we'd been fighting our landlord to stop him from selling it to someone else. He did sell it, regardless of the fact that we were still buying and paying for it. Ew. After he sold it, though, a windstorm caused one of the oldest dead trees in our yard to fall into the house straight through my bedroom and the dining room, damaging my parents' and sisters' rooms as well. It was around 2 in the morning. I was on call with a friend while watching Ice Age and eating a snack. I was in my brother's room, as it was one of the only rooms left unharmed. I was telling them about the recent personal traumas when I hear my mom calling my name from the living room. She had been sleeping there since her room was damaged when the tree fell. At first I thought it was just my brain playing tricks on me since I had spent all day packing since around 8 in the morning. I was just exhausted. All 3 of my dogs were in my brother's room with me, and they were too preoccupied begging for a snack to notice. I ignored it, and roughly 10 minutes later, I heard it again. I looked into the kitchen, but I didn't see anything. A chill ran up my spine, and I turned the TV up to make myself feel safer. For some reason, noise is what calms me down in paranormal situations. I continued talking with my friend until I was nearly slumped on call. I hung up and turned the lights in the kitchen and my brother's room off. When I woke up the next morning, my mom and stepdad were getting ready for an appointment that he had in the morning. It was around 8:30 when they left, so I had the house to myself for a couple of hours. I was done packing, so I sat there around and watched TV and YouTube to pass the time. I was laying down with my dogs, petting them, when I heard my mom call my name again. I didn't react or look away. I tried to ignore it until I heard a loud thump that sounded like one of the dining room chairs hit the ground. I looked up and walked to the doorway just in time for both me and my dog to witness their gravity water slide across the floor. It moved from where it was at the dining table to the bedroom door, and the empty water tank was rolling across the floor slowly. The 2 dogs got up and started barking, and I just stood there staring. I had goosebumps in my arms, and it felt like something was staring daggers through my soul. I felt like I wasn't welcome, that it was telling me to get out, or almost that it hated me and wanted me hurt. I saw it staring at me. I knew it was there. It was the entity that my sister had described before, a tall, dark man, neither young nor old, wearing an older-looking suit. He looked angry, but he didn't make another move, because my dogs were going off. I kept at least 1 dog with me from then on, and I called my friend to keep me company so I wouldn't be anxious. For most of the time in Williamsburg, my paranormal experiences were very common, but not chilling, not like that. Well, that was terrifying. They actually sent another round of stories that I plan on reading later this week, but they're scary. You were such a good writer. This is such good writing. I love it. I love the way you tell stories. All right, this next story is called Old Ghost Lady That Took Care of Me as a Baby. These stories took place around 25 years ago. I grew up in a small town in New Brunswick, Canada, around 30 minutes northwest of the Appalachian Trail. This story is more of my parents' experience than mine, as I was a baby, but my parents lived in a mobile home when I was born. They had experienced some paranormal events before I was born. For example, my grandfather would visit and would get locked in the bathroom. He used to get really angry about this because he thought someone was playing a prank on him, but no one ever went to that side of the house. My parents said that when I was born, they felt like whatever presence was around got more intense with my arrival. My mom remembers waking up in the middle of the night once and seeing an old lady sitting in a rocking chair in the corner of the room. My mom described this lady as having long black and gray hair. She was just rocking herself and smiling. My mom never felt intimidated or scared around this lady, and when she appeared to her, my mom said that she was surprised but still calm. According to my dad, however, she didn't like him very much. He was watching me one day and was napping on the couch while I was sleeping in my crib. He said he heard a woman calling his name. He thought that my mom must have come home. He sat up and saw that no, my mom was in fact not home, so he went back to sleep. The woman's voice called his name again, a bit louder this time, and it kind of startled him. He sat up again and listened, and he said at that point the woman's voice screamed his name and I started crying in the room. However, 2 experiences got to my mom a little bit. I started talking and walking quite early. My brother and I have only 17 months difference between us, and the first time this took place was before he was born. I had already transitioned to the small toddler beds, no longer needing a crib. My bedroom was quite small, and at the far end was a large dresser that my parents would put all of my toys, mainly stuffed animals, on at the end of the day. It was important to note that they used to push the toys up against the wall so that I couldn't reach them. I wasn't able to climb that high yet. Well, one morning, my mom woke up to the sound of me talking from my room. She got up and came to check on me, and when she came in, all of the toys were in my bed with me. Apparently, I was just playing and having fun. My mom asked me who I was talking to and how I got the toys, and I answered that the lady gave me the toys. The second experience that really scared her happened about a year later when my brother was already born. We were coming back from visiting my grandparents, and we were in the car with our mom. She pulled up to the house, and my brother was pointing at the door and asked my mom, "Who's the man in the window?" My mom said she'd never felt that scared before in the house. But the fact that my brother and I could see a man standing in that door scared her, and she said we stayed in the car for a while until she felt it was safe. We moved out of that house not long after, and they sold the mobile home to another family in our community. That family still lives in that house to this day. The mom has shared with my mom that paranormal stuff still happens in that home, and sometimes it does scare them. My dad sometimes jokes that if I ever went back to that house because the old lady apparently loved me a lot, that she would keep me. Kind of scares me, not gonna lie. We all agree that she cared a lot for me, and maybe she would show herself, but I'm not confident enough in my abilities to want to try it. I think she did like you. She probably had that maternal instinct and just wanted to take care of a baby. This next one is titled Possible Haunting, Please Help Us. My first experience in this old apartment began shortly after my grandfather had passed away in late October of 21. There wasn't much of an emotional turmoil with his passing as we weren't close. However, he is brought up later in the story. In the early hours of this morning, a hand hit the bedroom window of my third floor apartment. It was the distinct sound of skin against glass. The bedroom window had a 3-story drop just outside of it, so it would be impossible for anyone to be up there. The second story was experienced by River while visiting for Thanksgiving break 2022. I have a pair of cowboy boots that I wear consistently, still do to this day, and the sound of them on the hardwood floor was very recognizable. He woke up to the sound of my cowboy boots pacing in the kitchen. He got scared and texted me, thinking there was an intruder, but there was no one else in that apartment. He also had an overall uneasy feeling just being in the building. The building was a 100-year-old school building, one of the oldest buildings in town, and my grandfather even went to school there. I lived in a tiny town in northwest Pennsylvania. The night that River went back to the university, I was laying in bed when I noticed a man-shaped shadow moving in the kitchen in the exact same spot where River heard the footsteps. A few days later, I had a nightmare about the shadowy figure following me from place to place, and I woke up to the feeling of nails dragging up my back. In January of 23, River moved into the apartment with me following his departure from university. It only took a few days for the tall man to show up again. He was standing in the living room by the recliner, visible from the bedroom. He almost looked as tall as the ceiling. The next sighting was by the chair again, only he was looming over River on the couch while we watched a Louie Lane video. Louie Minchin, I love that girl. We began to go for drives to get out of the house and away from the man, sometimes even staying out until dawn just to feel safe. After a particular night of footsteps and very loud taps throughout the apartment, I decided to confront this entity, claiming that it had no control over the situation and that we weren't afraid. I felt a hand around my throat choking me. It wouldn't be the last time that this entity would choke us, often causing a pill and throat feeling. We began to hear each other's voices when the others weren't speaking. I was scrubbing the garbage can after taking the trash out, and I heard River's voice ask me what I was doing. I turned around expecting to see my roommate, but he was in the bedroom at the time. River also heard my voice early in the morning asking him if he wanted ice cream, to which he replied to. The most violent experience that we had in that apartment was both of us having similar nightmares at the same time. I'm going to include both of our nightmares, both written in first person, but I'll differentiate. Me. I don't dream often, usually only when I'm having a nightmare, and even then they aren't frequent. River was sleeping on the couch during this time. The proximity made him feel safer regarding the circumstances. This particular night, I had been asleep for far too long. I was dreaming about something else, but it was like something changed the channel. I was lying in bed in my dream, looking over at River on the couch asleep. I hear a noise from the kitchen. My bed was in the living room. So I peeked over my headboard to look, using my elbow to prop my head up. There was this tall man standing in the kitchen by the stove. He was taller than the built-in cupboards in the wall, which would have made him at least 7 to 8 feet tall. I started to breathe very heavily, unable to break my gaze from him. River managed to wake up, telling me that I had started hyperventilating in my sleep and that he had a nightmare as well. River. I was sleeping on the couch one night a few months after moving in, and I had one of the worst sleep paralysis episodes to date. It started with a woman in a 20s style hair, makeup, and nightgown standing in our kitchen. With this one being over a 100-year-old building, it completely checks out. She was covered in blood and had a detached jaw, almost as if she had herself. She was crying for help, and then I saw the tall man looming over me. Maybe it wasn't sleep paralysis, because I remember picking my phone up and texting my roommate, "He's here," and the sound of the phone hitting the floor. I remember seeing the text and hearing the thud when it dropped. It was so real, but it wasn't. And then my roommate wakes me up because she is now hyperventilating. We started staying in hotels in March when it was affordable, sleeping in the car when it wasn't. We visited numerous metaphysical shops, even going as far as Cleveland to ask for help. We did everything they told us to do, performing numerous cleansing and banishing rituals. We even took on Hellenistic deities for help. We're witches after all. The situation at the apartment got bad enough that we decided to move as soon as we were able to. That brings us to October of 2023. We moved into another 100-year-old building, this time in the city. It had some residual energy, but nothing inherently negative. We thought we'd escaped the tall man, but we were wrong. Around the holiday stress, there was some emotional strain within the household, and he made another appearance. Yet again, he appeared in the kitchen by the stove, different appliances, no attachment. I was in the process of coming down from a breakdown, and he was shoved backwards into my door as I stood in the doorway. The auditory and visual apparitions have gotten worse since, and both of us have heard each other's voices when we're not actually there. I also saw River out of the corner of my eye while I was cleaning the sink, peeking his head around the corner to look at me, but River was cleaning the bathroom. There's been lots of tapping and the sound of footsteps, and more scarily, the sound of doors unlocking and cabinets opening on their own. I had my first nightmare in this new apartment in early February, in which I was sitting in the living room in my normal spot. I like to sit where I can see the kitchen and the bathroom, as that's where he's been seen the most. I noticed a small apparition, about a child's height, turn the kitchen light off, and I got up to turn it back on, and it just turned it off again. Then a friend of mine from high school, who I haven't seen since 11th grade, came out of my bedroom into the living room and asked, "What are you doing here?" To which she responded, "I think you already know," and looks towards the kitchen, and I woke up shortly after. River had an experience while he was still living with his parents in Mississippi. That seems it might be linked, but we're not sure, so I'll include it just in case. River. This is like River telling his story. I grew up in northern Mississippi in the middle of the woods, and I mean in the woods. Town was from a very early stage. During the summer of 2022, I was home in between semesters from the university I went to in Ohio. I had what I'm going to call a dream, or a premonition, or an invitation maybe. I've had sleep paralysis before, but this was different. I was right at the point of being half asleep but still half awake, and I heard what sounded like the front screen door to the house slamming shut. Then I heard loud boots stomp on the hardwood floor. I couldn't get past that halfway point of being asleep and not. Then I felt hands around my throat, choking me, all around my head. The feeling that followed is something that I can only describe as something heavy crawling in my head. I was too scared to open my eyes, and I screamed for my mom, but it only came out as a choked gasp. After it stopped, it felt like forever until I felt safe to open my eyes. I saw nothing out of the ordinary in the room, so it couldn't have been an intruder. It sounds silly, but my next thought was that it was possibly a seizure or even a stroke. I went to tell my mom, who was a nurse, at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was obviously fine, but I started thinking. For the past few years, I've heard my mom and brother talking outside while I thought I was home alone. After further investigation, it was confirmed that I was completely home alone. Before I was born, my mom saw a singular wolf stare at me for about 10 minutes from the edge of the woods, before it turned around and walked off into the trees. Mississippi does not have wolves, not even in northern Mississippi. We both know that that wasn't a wolf, and I'm convinced that I and you both know what that was. And that's the end of River's story. I've even started seeing the tall man at work often in halls. I worked graveyard shift at a hotel and heard the entity speak words River often would say. Just as I'm writing this, I had a hard time even getting my computer to boot up, and it keeps glitching as I write. I included a picture of something we found in one of our photos. Do you see the face, the eyes, and the nose? Something doesn't want our story told. Dude, I'm so sorry. It's like, so it's not the like tall guy. It seems like he's latched on to one of you guys. It seems like he's attached to River, is what it sounds like to me. I think River definitely. You guys said you did a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you've done personal cleanses if you're witches, but I'm curious to know if you did, if that helped. And also, if you haven't done it yet, I think River should do a cord cutting ritual with this entity, because no. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this video. It's reading 30 minutes right now, which after I edit down, it won't be that long, but I don't want to keep you guys for longer. I will see you in a few days, and yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. Bye.